Hello everybody, ADDF Toxic here. I'd like to do a little album overview of my album, Three Races. So Three Races, it's really some of my earliest music that I wrote when I started playing around with Melody Assistant. So this was around 2007. I used to write music with my keyboard back here. Of course, this was at my parents' house, and I just write it down on paper, and then I started to I wanted something easier, so I went and searched the internet, found Melody Assistant, wrote some piano songs well, actually I think I was still using the keyboard, but I wrote it down in Melody Assistant instead because my writing is honestly crap. But anyways, when I started using Melody Assistant, I also started to play around with different instruments because it comes with a basic MIDI exporter, and sequencer, so I can put all these instruments on and make all sorts of music. And this is really when I started playing around with that. I created a song called Up and Down. I also created a song called A Quick Rockin' Song. Those were the first two songs that I remember making with... Actually, I think they were the first that I made when I started playing around with Melody Assistant altogether. And they ended up on this album. I don't know. I had this idea for this album, and I just grabbed whatever was available to me, which was the first few songs that I'd played around with, those, and the songs that I started writing. Now, also around the same time, I was interested in modding StarCraft. I found a bunch of modding tools. I used these modding tools, ended up finding the music folder for StarCraft, and found how to change that. So after writing a few songs, experimenting with different templates, different instruments, I decided that I'm going to create StarCraft-like music. It is nothing like StarCraft. I don't really know how to make that type of music, but basically this album is what I came up with. So I assigned the first few songs that I had made to something in StarCraft. So for example, Up and Down, I decided that's the music that's going to play when you insert the CD and the installer pops up, when the menu that says play StarCraft, exit, campaign editor, whatever. And there's the other one, A Quick Rockin' Song. I assigned that to the startup sound for the campaign editor. And actually, A Quick Rockin' Song, the reason it's called A Quick Rockin' Song is because I was starting to play around with templates. If you go into Melody Assistant, you can choose a blank template, choose your own instruments and everything, or it has these pre-made templates. This one was the Rock Band template. It's under Orchestra Modern. And then I don't exactly know where I started having the idea of making songs to put in a custom sort of StarCraft game. But Beat Beat Strum Strum, I'm guessing this was probably created with that in mind, because this is the main, I assigned that to the main menu theme, and the drums actually slow down at the end of that song. The reason I do that is so that it can loop easily to the beginning again, because that song is on the loop in the game, so it's not just going to suddenly stop and then suddenly start back up again. Red A for reggae, making up words there. That was me playing around with another template. This one is under Orchestra Modern Reggae Drums. And it comes with guitar, acoustic bass, and 8 bars of a drum beat. And so it actually had the drum beat in there, and I just took that and started putting some random guitar stuff on it because I really wasn't good at music theory at the time. And I use that for the Terran ready room, as everybody else calls it. I always call it the briefing room, but it's the ready room. Music in it, and it can loop because it's designed so the end of the song flows back into the beginning of the song, like much like the beat beat strum strum. And then there's a rock and guitar. Most of these are in the same order as I have on the album. I used that for the first Terran song. Of course, the original's much more epic. I don't know when I wrote this one really, but it looks like the Rock Band template, but I also added trumpet, glockenspiel, and cymbal. And also, in case you're wondering, there's about a minute and 30 seconds in. There's this strange sound. I for some reason decided to put a bunch of 64th notes, I think it's E and F, and just basically torture the trumpet player. Because switching between those two notes really fast for a whole bar, or something like that. The next song is Speeding Drums, which is the second Terran song. Again, I used a template, orchestra modern hard rock drums, so it came with the drum rhythm, and I added onto the drum rhythm a little bit. And then, actually I'm not sure if it came with the overdrive guitar. Yeah, must have. Overdrive guitar, chorus guitar, slap bass, and keyboard. It came with those instruments, and I just used those. Again, I didn't know much music theory at the time, so it's just random notes placed. And then the Terran 3 song, I created Adding Techno, which is again a template, orchestra modern techno, and it comes with a whole bunch of instruments, along with a drum beat, and the instrument styles, I've never heard of them because they were all not exactly named right. Not named the same thing as the instrument. I think it was created for another language or something. But this song, I kind of created it in different pieces. I started off with one instrument, then added a second instrument, and just piled the rest of the instruments all on top of each other until I had used all the instruments that the template came with. And then I started just doing whole notes of each instrument without piling on top of each other. And then I started making telephone sounds, which was basically just a bunch of 64th notes with each instrument. And then, I really don't know, it's just really a bunch of random notes at the end. I'm gonna skip my poor guitar and my lucky guitar for now. Smacking drums. This is where we get into the Zerg, and well, I'm not really sure when I wrote this one, but I may have written it with the idea of StarCraft in my mind, because I started listening to the music and saying like, Terran is kind of more rock music with guitars and drums. Zerg, I didn't know how to describe that. I just kept hearing a bunch of different drums and percussion instruments. So smacking drums implies that I had that in mind. Protoss, which is coming later, kind of more classical orchestral stuff, which I was actually terrible at, but I'll get to that later. So smacking drums, yeah, this is Zerg briefing. I was kind of trying to do a drum solo, sort of, but kind of failed. And then I created a song called Ayat Tech, which was the first in-game Zerg music, so Zerg 1. It's a familiar template. Orchestra, modern, techno. The same one that I used for adding techno, except... so it's the same drum rhythm, but I used the rest of the instruments a lot better. I also added a crash cymbal at one point. That wasn't in the template. And then there's a song called Shaking Guitar, which is, again, the orchestra modern rock band template. And I put my own rhythm in there, and the hi-hats, it's a bunch of open hi-hats, close hi-hats, open hi-hat, close hi-hat, back and forth at one point in the rhythm, which is why it kind of sounded like a shaking. That's why I called it shaking guitar. And then there's Twisty Handle Thing, which is definitely one of my favorites from this album. That is the reason I called it that. When I started listening for instruments, I tried to think of an elementary school that the kids were always playing with this instrument where it's kind of like bearings on the outside and you twist it. I had no idea what the name was for that though, and so I kept writing songs, adding random instruments. Couldn't find it. Wrote the song anyway, and then eventually I discovered that is called a cabasa. The only name I knew for it was Twisty Handle Thingy. So I named the song Twisty Handle Thingy. And the song starts off with a cabasa, and then another cabasa. And I kind of, again, I tried to make it a drum solo, but decided that I kind of had this drum rhythm that was going solid, so I added a guitar on it, and the whole song is really a bunch of, like, you have a measure and then you have the same measure again. That happens a lot in that song. Oh yeah, and it has a few bongos in there as well, which was a really weird idea, but I kind of liked it. Again, I'm going to skip my poor drums and my lucky drums. Skip into the protest section, which starts off with strings ready. And ready, again, meaning the ready room or the briefing room. And it's written to be able to loop perpetually, so the ending flows into the beginning of the song again. Windy Seas. I pulled out a template because I have no idea what's in an orchestra. The template is orchestra, classical, full orchestra. Those are folder names, by the way. You go into a folder called the orchestra, and then you go into a folder called classical, then you find the template called full orchestra. And there's a whole bunch of instruments there. I had no idea what to do with it. I did something anyway. It's not really great. And then there's Erie Orchestra. The template was orchestra, classical, string quintet. Again, because I know nothing about this kind of music. And the violins kind of sounded eerie when I wrote it, so that's why I called it Erie Orchestra. Blow Me Away was orchestra, classical, wind quintet. So trying a whole bunch of different styles here. Like my music, I tend to experiment with my music a lot, even back then apparently. So since it's a wind quintet, Blow Me Away is the title. Yeah, so skip my poor violin, skip my lucky violin for now. I'll get back to those. Down to Up was a song that I wrote later in the project. Actually, this was one of the last songs I wrote. It's kind of supposed to be something like Up and Down, except it's down to up, because I needed a different sound for the Brood War startup sound, because I was doing some crazy stuff. Quick Sad Strings is the quick sound that was supposed to be when it plays when it shows you the message that says you lose. Quick Happy Strings is when it says the message that says you win, or victory is what it actually says. Now I'm going to go back to the other songs that I skipped there. So after I wrote all the way up to My Poor Violin, Blow Me Away, so the 3 in-game songs and the briefings, and the installer startup and the campaign editor startup, at this point I had realized that there were kind of 3 icon instruments, I guess. So there's the guitar for the rock songs for Terran, the drums, which was what I kept trying to do with the Zerg, and then the crappy orchestral stuff for the Protoss. And I decided to use a violin to represent that. So that's where my poor guitar and my lucky guitar are the defeat and the victory themes for Terran. So after the message pops up, and that says you lose. You click OK, and then it goes to that screen with all the stats or whatever. Those songs would play there if I actually did make a game like this. I was really into game design a while ago. And so these songs were written after everything, like I said, and uses the guitar because the guitar is kind of the icon for the Terran music. And then the Zerg music, the icon for the Zerg music was the drums, so we got my poor drums for the Zerg defeat, and my lucky drums for the Zerg defeat. My lucky drums, I finally got a drum solo. There is nothing in that song that is not on a percussion track. And there's a lot of bongos in there because I enjoyed putting the bongos in Twisty Handle thingy that I decided to go crazy with the bongos again. And the reason the drum solo worked, I think, this time is because it's so upbeat. There were a couple times where it's, listening to it now, it's not really, it kind of stutters a little bit, I feel, but I'm overall happy with that, how that track turned out. It's another one of my favorites from this album. And of course these can perpetually loop. And there's, again, my poor violin and my lucky violin, because the violin is the icon for the Protoss music. Any other notes I have here? Wow, my poor violin. 40 beats per minute. That's kind of slow. Because I don't know, I guess I thought that slowing things down would automatically make it more sad, which is not exactly true. I had no idea about minor and major chords at the time. And I'm not sure if I used a template for these. I went back and looked a few weeks ago, but I couldn't tell. Is there anything... I think I covered all the tracks now. One more thing that I wanted to mention, though, is the album art for this is playing a guitar like a violin with a drumstick. Again, the three icons. So, violin, Protoss, or playing the guitar, playing the Terran music's instrument, like the Protoss music's instrument, with a stick for the Zerg music's icon. And that's what that picture is. And then at the bottom, I'm quite impressed with most of how that turned out. It is supposed to be like the StarCraft interface. Bottom left is a map, and it actually also says 3 races. That part's a little bit hard to read, but that's what it says there. And I just kind of drew a fake map and masked it out as if my characters had explored the area to make those letters. So those are visible on your map, because again, StarCraft. So, and then on the far right side, where StarCraft normally has all the action buttons, I drew a bunch of actions there, so from various different icons of the races. So there's a cymbal, there's a kick drum, a guitar pick, a violin bow, and I don't know, I think that's some sort of drumstick or something. So a lot of Zerg there, obviously, because I don't know, I just found it easier to think of things for Zerg that would be easy to draw there. And then the middle is my logo. Because I needed to put that somewhere, and it's actually missing the face, but I didn't know what else to put there, like, the face of what character you have selected and things. So that's going to be the end of this album overview. It's I know this music isn't the greatest stuff in the world. I'm not pretending it is, but I still kind of enjoy listening to some of the stuff, especially like Twisty Handle Thingy or My Lucky Drums every once in a while, so I thought I might as well share it. and have a good life.